Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figured Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hey guys, it's Adam here, and today we're going to be talking about our friend, the Xbox 360, and the fact that if you're watching this the day it came out, it is 20 years old. Yes, this is not a drill, this is not a joke. For those who are millennials, or about my age, 20 years. November 22nd, 2005. That one stings. But anyway, a little bit. Now it stings for you. Let's all enjoy our pain together. Before we do that, though, if you guys could like this video, comment down below, subscribe if you've never done that before, and check out all my social media stuff in the description. I've got Twitter, Instagram, Discord, Patreon, Facebook, Spreadshirt, Travel Channel, etc. I appreciate the support on all those platforms. Thank you so much. Let's get on with it. So, even though I slightly screwed up the intro with all the social media stuff there, which, by the way, you really should check out. I really do appreciate that. That aside, we are going to talk about the Xbox 360, and to get this out of the way, this is not what you would call one of my traditional generation recap videos. I have actually already done one of those for the Xbox 360. This is more about visiting an old friend. Yes, we'll talk about some of the history, we'll talk about some of the games. We can also talk about some of the updates, things that have changed since the last time I had a major discussion video about this particular console, kind of what little oddities have arisen since. And just to give some more perspective on where this system ranks and lies now that it's had multiple successors. And yeah, it'll just be kind of fun. So we can just start off. I think we'll talk about some of the history, like why does this console even exist? And I think this is important because it also helps kind of recontextualize and frame where this console is now. So the history of the Xbox 360. Microsoft, of course, launched the original Xbox back in 2001. And while it modest success in terms of adoption rate, from a financial perspective, was an absolute disaster. Losing over almost $4.5 billion net negative is how much that system cost them. But if you know the history of the Xbox, you know that that didn't bother Microsoft at all, because the entire point of the original Xbox was to just make sure that Microsoft was there to kind of aim the gaming industry in a specific direction to avoid threats to PCs. And as weird as that sounds, that is completely true. You have to remember that by the early 90s, very few people had PCs, and towards the end of the 90s, most people did. But the idea back then, for those who are old like me, you remember that there was always this talk about, well, you won't need a PC because the game consoles are going to start having keyboards, they can go online, you can check your email, what do you need a PC for? As ridiculous as that sounds now, since Microsoft was super threatened by that possibility, they got in the industry just to have some control over its trajectory. That was the whole point. It was actually kind of intended to be a one-and-done situation, but the adoption rate was good enough, and they kind of had enough fun with it, and they also had a relevant product they could actually get out in the world. They thought, why not do this again, but this time let's try to make a console that's actually in of itself a successful, profitable endeavor. Enter the Xbox 360. So the logic with the 360 was, okay, we had no chance of defeating Sony's PlayStation 2, but we do have a chance of getting out in front of them on this PlayStation 3 thing. So we got to get our next generation console out there. Now, because the Xbox original, as nice as it was, hadn't been the biggest hit, it also gave them the benefit that it didn't matter exactly when they dropped it, because while some people would have been annoyed, it did have a nearly 1,000-game library worldwide, and so it's not like you didn't have a lot of stuff to pull from. So they went ahead and they went into the system a little bit earlier than they probably should have, which would eventually come back to haunt them. The hardware in this thing was actually pretty cool, and I remember when I first saw it being played, I thought, well, how much better could it possibly be than the original Xbox in terms of visual fidelity and graphical power, etc.? How is that even possible? Then I saw it and I was just like, oh, I was wrong. That was a huge improvement. It was much better. Like, I thought that era of jumps was just over, and I was obviously wrong. But yeah, under the hood, the thing had a lot of additional capabilities that were really nice. It came with, well, there was to be fair, there were two versions. There was the core version with that hard drive, but it also had a hard drive that was hot swappable. So for future upgradable storage and all that sort of thing, you could do that. The original launch models did not have HDMI on them. That would not happen for a full year. It still had memory cards, which were taken out of later models. Like, these two don't have the memory card slots. It's only the original models that do. But yeah, the system launched. And it was modestly priced. And it was actually a pretty big success. I'll talk about my own getting it later, but like the system comes out, it does fine. It has an initial year of an additional install base as it's going, and everything is kind of going all right for them. And then the following year in 2006, both the Wii and the PS3 basically launched on the exact same weekend. And Microsoft really benefited from the fact that their direct competitors made some strange choices. Nintendo had obviously opted with the Wii to make a non-direct competition console. They were like, we're just taking the GameCube, putting some steroids in it, giving it motion controls, and we're going to be off in our own corner doing our own thing. We don't really want to be seen as direct competitors to you. And Sony, of course, was the obvious target, but Sony got so full of themselves, which it happens. Microsoft eventually would do the exact same thing. Every console manufacturer does, usually on their third console. But they got so full of themselves, they thought, we can make a $900 console that we sell at a loss of $600 because the adoption rate will be so high that the games will offset it, etc., etc. And people rejected the PS3 pretty openly at the beginning. That left the 360 in a very unique position. It actually not only had momentum at the beginning, but was able to continue to build on that. And it became a success story for quite some time. And the one that was the most shocking to everybody is that the 360 actually did really well in Japan, at least initially. So Microsoft had learned from the original Xbox that they just didn't understand the Japanese market. It didn't make sense to them. And one of the wisest decisions they made, and it might have actually, I don't know who made that decision. It's possible it was, of all people, Peter Moore, the guy who famously killed the Shenmue franchise in North America. But that guy, I'm not sure it was him, but somebody over there at the Xbox team made the decision that we don't understand Japan, so we're just going to let Japan be Japan. So they put the 360 out over there, and it actually does pretty well. Now, wasn't like a stellar success, like crushing it, but it became what was known as the otaku console. It was like, in a lot of ways, within the Japanese culture and Japanese gaming market, it was seen as the spiritual successor to the Sega Saturn, as weird as that might sound. Because the Sega Saturn, as great as it was here, over there it was a juggernaut of success, but largely its library was a lot of anime stuff, and obviously shoot-em-ups and things like that. And so this system kind of filled that void because the Dreamcast only kind of chipped away at it, but not sufficiently. And keep in mind that technically the last Sega Saturn release was in 2004. This system launched in 2005. So, I mean, there's a bit of a gap there, but technically that's kind of how it went. So the system, and also Microsoft made it crazy stupid cheap over there because they really wanted to be relevant in that country. So it was actually working very well for them. And it was working well over here. It was working fine in Europe, more so the UK than any other part of Europe. I think Australia was doing fine too. Everything was kind of all right. But while they were continuing to put out certain games that people were excited about, things like Halo 3, obviously, Gears of War came into existence, all this sort of stuff, they were doing just fine. And then there was a change. Largely around the 2008/2009 economic crisis. Actually, I want to jump it back a little bit. This has nothing to do with it, but it was kind of an interesting point. I think the first major, not mistake, but issue that they ran into was the Blu-ray versus HD DVD format war. Now, you got to go back in time to really remember this one. But Blu-ray, the format that is still around today, although has largely been replaced by 4K Blu-ray and, of course, streaming, was launched in 2006, essentially with the PlayStation 3. It existed on other mediums, but that was basically its creation. Now, Microsoft had designed the Xbox 360 around DVD technology, not around what we would think of as high-definition optical disc format technology, so not Blu-ray, not HD DVD, obviously not 4K Ultra HD, none of that. So, according to interviews that came out much later, the decision was as simple as it sounds. When they found out, okay, Sony is backing Blu-ray, that's it, they're our direct competitor, we're going to back HD DVD. But their heart wasn't in it. So they made a little attachment, a separate add-on that you would plug in via USB. It was a separate drive, and it would allow the Xbox 360 to play HD DVDs. And for about a year, that battle went on until HD DVD ultimately failed. It was abandoned by, I forget, I think it was Warner Brothers, ultimately was the one that made that call because they were the only studio supporting both formats. And eventually they just decided to stick to Blu-ray. And as soon as they did, the domino effects fell, and that was that. So Microsoft was out on that point. But you basically looked at it like, okay, well, now this system plays dead technology, and it's incapable of supporting Blu-ray. In fact, this is a fun little story. Around the time of the death of HD DVD, like right before it died, like when Toshiba eventually had to capitulate on it, right beforehand, Microsoft was actually talking about like a premium Xbox 360 that would have a built-in HD DVD drive, and then there would be, if you had that version of the system, you could actually take advantage of it, so it could play different games, would have different storage mediums, and take blah, 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 blah. Like, the whole idea was they were thinking about using it. That never happened. However, that was really the first hiccup. When they lost that, it definitely did not help their image. But anyway, so eventually Blu-ray wins, but was never quite the success story, and still isn't, that DVD was. But doesn't matter. The system does just fine. But then you get into the '08 recession, and Microsoft was already kind of getting to like, well, we're getting ready for the next Xbox. It crashes, and they're like, let's stay out of that. Like, let's hold on to the system for a while. But then it happened. A couple of really bad things all at once. One is the most obvious, because it's right in everybody's faces, the Red Rings of Death fiasco. Now, as I said before, when Microsoft had prepared this console, they did basically try to get it out there earlier than it had, so there hadn't been sufficient testing, as it turns out, on quality control. The biggest issue, as I understand it, was that a lot of the boards were kind of all right, but the solder in particular they used was very cheap. Because it was functional, so they didn't question it until they realized over time, when the system heats up, the said solder basically melts, cracks, and things get disconnected, resulting in the Red Rings of Death fiasco. This became such an epidemic. Like, I remember when this happened, it was expected to occur to everybody's console, and Microsoft eventually had no choice. Stephen Ballmer eventually had to make the decision, who is now the Los Angeles Clippers owner. He had to make the call that they were going to have to just do free tech support for anybody with a Red Rings of Death console. So, like, what they would do is you would contact them. They eventually got this all the way to the point it was just a basic website. You included your serial number, and they would mail you a box, aka the coffin, as it was called. You'd bundle it up, and then you'd send it off to them. And then in an attempt to reduce costs, they took that away and said, we'll give you a mailing label, and you just stick it on any box you have. And people were just irate about this. Like, you can go back to early YouTube and see a lot of people talking about this. People would be so upset, they would take the biggest boxes they could find. Like, people would take like entire television boxes and put the 360 in there and just weight it down with as much mass as possible to cost Microsoft as much money as they could to get it there. I know personally I had 2 360s die from this exact process. And I was pissed, and so one of them I wrapped up in foam, and just for no reason, I threw a whole bunch of I had a bunch of defective DVD-Rs, from failed burns or whatever. I just put them all in the box just to make it weigh as much as I could. And one other time I had a system error where the disk drive failed. Apparently it was very temporary, but there was a bug around the beginning of Halo 3 that some models of the 360 it would basically kill the disk drive. It was rare, but it actually did happen to me. And so when I called in Microsoft support, they're like, okay, we can repair it. It'll be like $200. And I was like, oh, no, I don't want to do that, because it's like the price of the system. But I found out if I just wrap some towels around the vents and run the 360, it would inevitably red ring. And then when I sent it in that way, they had to do the full repair for free. But whatever. So yeah, that whole situation cost Microsoft about $2 billion, which really ate into the success of the system from a financial perspective. Meanwhile, they made a completely separate choice. They brought in the eventual genius Don Matrick, who is the guy most associated with the Xbox One's DRM, connect online all the time, TV sports. That guy, the guy who basically is now infamously associated with the death of the Xbox brand. That's when he entered the scene. And around the time he entered the scene, I don't know if this is his fault or if it's just a coincidence, at the exact same time, that's when they lost Japan. Now, as the story goes, because I've been in Japan a bunch of times and I've heard this story over there from basically expats who live there, and they're like, yeah, this is how it went down. The Xbox 360 over there was a great success story for like the first 4 years. And then around 2008, 2009, again, the same time Don Matrick came in. Apparently, as it goes, if you believe it was Don Matrick, somebody at Microsoft US requested, or the Xbox team more accurately, requested a visual presentation of what was going on with Xbox Japan, because they just didn't know, because they didn't pay attention to it. So they wheeled in a Japanese 360 along with a bunch of the exclusives and just showed them what was going on, what kind of games they were. And purportedly, what happened was, again, it might have actually been Don Matrick himself, but I don't know that, basically reacted to, what is this? It's all like anime and date sims and shoot 'em ups. We can't put Xbox's name on this. We can't have Microsoft on this stuff. No. The Japanese would not want that. That's ridiculous. Cancel all that. Don't allow that anymore. We're just going to give them Madden and Call of Duty. That's what the Japanese want. As soon as they did that, very predictable result to literally anyone watching this video, it failed. The Xbox brand completely lost confidence over there. The Japanese were like, nope, that's it, we're done with you. And it has never recovered since, very famously. And so they started off so strong. Meanwhile, their direct competitors, I mean, the Wii was a juggernaut of success. Everybody knows that. Even though it sucked, if you ask me, it still was very financially successful. No part of me disputes that. So that part of the market was kind of taken. Meanwhile, Sony had been very quietly and very intelligently repairing and salvaging the PS3's image. They had made the slim version, they had made it cheaper, they had started putting out more worthwhile games, and people started seeing it as a really cool exclusives machine that they kind of needed. And eventually, and that very technically, you get all the way to the end of the generation, and in terms of pure sales on a global perspective, the Wii won the generation, the PS3 inched out second place, and Xbox 360 just barely lost of the three. But at least it beat the Mattel Hyperscan, so, it's got that. Which is really sad, because it is easily my favorite of the three consoles in that generation. Again, I'm not really including the Mattel Hyperscan, but yeah, that's ultimately how it went down. And eventually, Microsoft would move on from it and create the Xbox One, as well as now the modern-day Xbox Series X. Its legacy in that sense is that at least the Xbox 360 did get a measure of backwards compatibility integrated into the Xbox One, which was then passed on to Xbox Series X. I'm still hoping, by the way, for another update to that, only because since their last update, Microsoft has acquired Activision, which made a ton of games for the original Xbox and the Xbox 360 that could theoretically be brought over with relatively few rights issues, but whether they care about that is a completely different story. But yeah, it is a great console, and I look at where they went after this with, the Xbox One, and we know, because we all saw it, the Xbox One's intended purpose was not to be a game console. It was like the CDI of its day. It's like, it's going to be a minivan that's capable of all sorts of different features, and one of them is going to be gaming. They salvaged it a bit, made it a better system, but that's not what it was intended for. And of course, the Series X is really just intended as a firmware update of the modern Xbox ecosystem, which we've talked about that to death. These days, Microsoft and the Xbox team does not care about having a dedicated game console that is an exclusives machine that is trying to win on its own merits. They care about having an ecosystem that can integrate into various platforms, and that's just one of the mechanisms by which it is distributed. So when you look at the four consoles that Microsoft has produced, one was created for protecting a completely different industry, and two were created essentially as a way of just controlling how things are distributed. But only one was ever created for the sole purpose of, aside from potential revenue stream, duh. But only one was ever created as a, let's just make the best game console we can make. And that is our friend, the Xbox 360, which launched, of course, like I said, exactly 20 years ago today, if you're watching this the day it came out. And I'll love it for that. And I like to look back at its history and see it that way, because it really was the best one of the ones they made. Sadly, not in terms of reliability, but from what Microsoft themselves offered you, it was great. Now, obviously, things like a modded Xbox are wonderful, and obviously, the One and the Series, etc., are more capable machines. I don't dispute that, and because they have backwards compatibility, they do throw it in there. But the attitude of what created it, what motivated it, to me is important because it does really show in the work, and I appreciate it for that. Of course, we had the original launch model, which is not this one. That I have that in the other room. It's the white one. A year later, they would do a black Elite one. This is the one that had HDMI, and then that became more standard. So they really only ran without that for about a year. This actually came out around the exact same time as the PS3 and the Wii in Microsoft's attempt to stay relevant there. But in an effort to get rid of the Red Rings of Death image, they essentially decided to do an entire console redesign, and that's how you got this. This is the Xbox 360 Slim. This is by far the one I actually played the most, this exact unit, because it was vastly more reliable. It was obviously smaller, it had more capabilities, etc. It was just a nicer version of the system. And towards the very end of the lifespan, they released the E, which is what this thing is. This one I barely ever used, because by then I was just buying it as like a token novelty to have part of the 360 set. Annoyingly, they all have different power supplies, which is stupid. And yeah, this one, there was never any great reason to use it much. But, you know, it was cool to be able to hot swap the hard drives and bring your accounts over and all that sort of thing. But yeah. So I'll talk about some of the games here. I need to get this very clear. Every time I do a video like this and I talk about some of the games, you inevitably get 4 million people being like, where is my favorite game? Where is this game? How could you not even mention that game? Etc., 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 etc. Guys, I could not possibly. There's like 2,000 titles on the Xbox 360, and I'm only bringing out a few for a point. These aren't even necessarily all the games I played the most on the system. In fact, some of them I didn't play, but they're just here for a purpose. It's just chill. Forget that. Forget the hostility of, why is my game not there? Enjoy yourself, enjoy the discussion, and then after this, I got a suggestion. Turn on your Xbox 360 and play your favorite games, because this is a perfect time to do it. But yes, okay, let's talk about this. So, as I said towards the beginning of this video, this system was one that actually smacked me in the face and realized games could actually look better than I thought, like, shockingly, even at that age. And the game that specifically did that was actually this. It's Condemned Criminal Origins. Now, this was a launch title. I got this right away, and this was the one when I brought it home. A buddy of mine, we just checked it out. We were playing it. We're like, dude, this looks amazing. And I sit there and I look back at it now, like I was playing it on a 720p ED TV over a component, and still I was blown away. Seeing this game now running, it looks even better, you know, through HDMI, etc. And it's just like, yeah, that was a really cool horror game. And fortunately, this one isn't made backwards compatible, so you can play it on modern stuff. There was a sequel. I didn't like that one as much, but this one was very, very good. Dead or Alive 4, also a very early title. I think it was a launch title, but I could be wrong. This one I loved. This was I would always enjoyed Dead or Alive 2 on the Dreamcast, but I didn't put as much effort into it. DOA 1 I played a little bit on the Saturn. DOA 3 was an original Xbox title, but I had kind of just skipped over it. This one, though, I realized like why I love this franchise. I had so much fun playing this, and this got me into the point where I was like, okay, I'm retroactively going back and getting the others, and when DOA comes out again, like when there's 5, I'm going to be super into it. I never really got around to 6. But yeah, I thought this game was phenomenal. Okay, this one I have to point out just because I'll be in trouble if I don't. Even though I'll be in trouble anyway. This is Halo 3 ODST. This is just meant to represent all of the Halo genre. Ironically, I don't actually have a copy of Halo 3 anymore. I thought I did. And I know it sounds baffling. It's because I had the Master Chief Collection, so I was like, oh, I didn't think I really needed that. Although technically ODST is part of that too, so it's like whatever. But when I went to go look at my collection, it wasn't there, and I was like, I guess I got rid of it? I don't even remember doing that, but whatever. Halo 3, I will tell you a story, though. I actually do remember when Halo 3 itself launched. That was a big night, and I remember a buddy of mine who was living here. I live in Chicago, and he was also living in Chicago, like a few blocks away. And we were just college buddies, and we'd hang out all the time. And he messages me, like, he just calls me up at, like, 11 p.m., and he's like, hey, man, Halo 3 is dropping in like an hour. I must have it. And I was like, what does that do with me? He's like, I want you to come with me. We'll wait in line and get it. And if you want to get it, that's fine. And I was like, all right, cool. Like, I didn't really care all that much. So I go with him. I get in line, and we're just chilling there. And then he sees a buddy of his who was in the store already. And he was just like, all right, I'll be right back. I'm going to go see my buddy, and I'll be right back. I was like, okay. And then he goes over. He comes back out a few minutes later with his copy of the game. He basically cut the line because his buddy worked there or whatever. And I was like, oh, are we done? I was like, okay, cool. So I guess I'll get it while I'm here, referring to me. And he was like, all right, cool, I'm going to leave now. Like, he was basically just screwing me over. Like, I only went there to do him a favor, and then he ditched me to go play Halo 3. We were still buddies after that, but that was one of those, like, that was kind of a jerk move. Ironically, I don't even apparently have that copy anymore. That one, I'm sad to say, might have been destroyed in my house fire, because I had moved certain games to the house, and I think that was one of them, because I can't find it, so I assume that was it. But yeah, to represent all of Halodom, Halo 3 ODST. I do have Halo Reach, though. I know that. Okay. This one I'm only showing as a shameless plug to myself. Jurassic Park the game. This was a very good game made before the terrible, even more terrible, sequel era of Jurassic World. I took all the footage of this game. I edited it into a movie. You can see it on this channel. It's called Jurassic Park 1.5. This game, I loved it. Telltale Games. This is like an out-of-print game now because Telltale doesn't even exist anymore. Of course, it's a licensing game, so it's definitely gone. So this is also kind of an expensive one now. But yeah, if you're interested in what this game was like I said, I did a whole thing you can watch. Okay, this one I'm only pointing out because it has to be said. Kinect Adventures. I did not enjoy this at all. But I'm only pointing it out because of the Kinect itself. We kind of forget that the Kinect concept did originate in the Xbox 360 and was an add-on with a camera, motion sensitivity. It was junk, man. It was, you know what, in hindsight, I should have picked Disneyland Adventures because, that's a much more exciting game. Not really, but at least I can do a...
Yes, this is in the game. You can see me.
Oh, and you can see me as well. Anyway, whatever. Kinect. We had to acknowledge it. It was an embarrassing failure, and unfortunately that failure led into the Xbox One, as you all know, but yeah, whatever. Ugh. Wash my hands of it. A game I truly loved, Lego Star Wars, The Complete Saga. Lego Star Wars, or Lego games, the more modern version of what we think of as Lego games, didn't get their origin in this system. They got it a generation earlier in the Xbox, PS2, GameCube era. However, I would argue that it was the 360 era where these games really exploded in popularity, and suddenly they were making Lego this, Lego that, and they were really good. And I'm just using that one to exemplify it because this game is awesome. Like, set aside if you don't even care about the franchise, these are just fun games. So I had a blast playing that. And it was also one of those things where, like, I played Lego Batman, I did all those. And one of the coolest things about the 360 that is unique to it, this was the iPod era, as I'm sure a lot of you know. Microsoft in the original Xbox had this idea where, because the system had a hard drive in it, if you wanted to, you could put a music CD in the system. It could rip the data, store the music on the console. You could listen to it when you wanted to, but also if games chose to be compatible, they could run said music over the game. People don't talk about this much, but they did carry that feature over to the 360. However, they recognized that while the CD was kind of an out-of-date piece of tech at that point, but what was modern was the iPod at the time. So the 360 uniquely is the only Xbox hardware that you can still do this. They had an iPod app. If you downloaded that, you didn't even need the app. It's just basically a firmware update. You download that, your iPod will now function in the music section of the Xbox 360. And because it does, the games were built a little smarter, so more games supported it. You could basically play games like this and just swap out the music with something totally different. I remember sitting around playing Lego Batman with the Shenmue score. It's like the sound effects and stuff all work. It's just you're playing with a totally different score. I enjoyed that, and I kind of miss that feature. I think technically the Xbox stuff now does it with like Spotify, although I don't subscribe to that. But I think that's a feature, but I could definitely be wrong. This one, Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing. Loved it. I initially only got this because, I'm mentioning Shenmue again, Ryo Hazuki of the Shenmue franchise was a playable character in this game, so I put full support into it, but then I ended up really loving it. I've told this story before, but this was the only game. You know how you ever go online to play with people and you think you're good at it, and the second you get there, there's like some army of 10-year-olds that just stomp you into oblivion. You're like, I was just here for fun, and now I'm dead. This was the only game I've ever played where I was that guy. Like, I'm not good at it anymore, but at the time, I was amazing. I was always getting first in like online tournaments. I was just unbelievably good at the game. Sadly, no more. But, anywho, I did love that game. It was available on other platforms. It was on the Wii. It was on the PS3. However, the 360 version had Banjo-Kazooie as exclusive characters, which was cool. I thought I had more than this. I also wanted to point this out. This is Star Wars The Force Unleashed. This game, I loved it. I remember when this came out, I didn't really care much about it. I got into it later. And I was like, wow, this is just really, really fun. My buddy Matt Sloan actually voiced Darth Vader in this game, actually both of these games, and he did a phenomenal job. And I remember playing this. You're playing this. Unfortunately, you have to play as Vader in the first level, and for some reason after that, they're like, you can never go back to it unless you create a new save, which I always thought was dumb. But the actual game, the majority of it, you're playing as Vader's apprentice, and it's like Star Wars Extreme. You know, like you're just killing everything. You have force powers. It's crazy. It's very non-canon, but it's a lot of fun action adventure. You know, game where you just basically destroy stuff. And this is the special edition that had a second disc with all the DLC on it, which had like Infinity's timelines of like, oh, what if the apprentice, you know, killed Vader or whatever and took over, you know, or something like that. But cool, different plot lines. I really love this game. Fortunately, it is backwards compatible on the One and the Series X. The sequel was unfortunately a huge letdown, but it's fine. But this game itself, absolutely loved. I'm a little annoyed with myself because I thought I put other games out here, but I didn't. I meant to, in particular, I meant to put Call of Duty 2 out here. Call of Duty 2 is probably my favorite game on the system, and probably the one I spent the most time with. And before you think of that as too much of like a dude bro answer, I know a lot of people love Call of Duty, and I got nothing against that. But to me, Call of Duty didn't turn out to be what it was intended. Originally, it was just a really interesting, good first-person shooter series based on historical events. That's the part I like, because I'm a big penchant for history. I have a penchant for it. I love it. Studying it. So the game was a way to interact with history. But they turned it into Madden, where it just came out every year, and it was like, well, screw the history elements. Now they're in space. You know, it's like, ugh. I didn't like any of that. And the whole online competitive thing never meant anything to me at all. So they lost me at that point. I went back and I tried like Call of Duty World War II. They came out, I think it was on Xbox One a few years ago. I remember playing that. That was okay. But like nothing recaptured Call of Duty 2. Hell, I'll say this. Call of Duty, I guess you call it 5, World at War, I really liked that one for that exact reason. It was just history campaign against the Japanese. You don't usually see that one. I enjoyed that. I didn't care about the online element, but it was fun. I liked it. So, yeah, I mean, obviously with the games, you could talk about it forever. Like I said, there's thousands of them, but I just wanted to point a few of those out for various reasons. So, I want to kind of go out with this, like, well, actually, there's 2 points I still want to make. But we'll talk about the launch of it, specifically how it tailored to me. You got to understand that this system came out at a very strange time for anybody in my age range. For me specifically, it came out in 2005, which was the year I graduated high school, but also the year I started college. So as a result, you're kind of in that mindset of like, your childhood is over, and you have to be an adult now, or at least the beginning of an adult. And that does result in a little bit of and so the 360 coming out at just that window meant that like I could cling to some childhood, and it's like the last system as a result that gets to play that role of just like, this is where everybody you know is still people you knew in high school and all that sort of thing. And I don't know, when I actually went to get the system, I remember I went to a Toys R Us. That Toys R Us, which RIP Toys R Us, though to be fair, it's kind of making a comeback in the US finally. That one was only a few minutes from my house. And I remember calling them and being like, what's the deal? On November 21st, I called them. I was like, what's the deal? You guys going to have? They're like, we're going to have a couple of units. We're not doing pre-orders. It's just first come, first serve. So I was like, okay, cool. So I ate dinner. I got some supplies together. And I drove over there. I told my mother I was going to be doing all this. She was like, you're stupid. Yeah, but go ahead. So I parked my car in the Toys R Us parking lot. And I went to get in line at like 7 in the evening. Now it's Chicago, so in the end of November, so it was cold, so I bundled up as best I could. There were already 2 people in front of me, but I was like, okay, I should be fine. They didn't specify how many they had, but I assume 3 is they're gonna manage. So we're chilling there, and as of course the night goes on, more and more people show up. And that was really cool. But that was the first time I'd ever done anything like that, where you just camp out for a console. You don't know these people, but you kind of all bond over this because, A, this is a dumb thing you're all doing together, but you're in the trenches together. Because inevitably, there will be people who are like, I don't respect your line, I want to cut it. That happens a lot. And so people kind of, stick together and like, no, we know you're lying. You weren't supposed to be there. Get out of here, like, etc. Eventually, I remember it's like midnight, and so inside, like, the Toys R Us staff who's like restocking stuff is like, they see us out there and they don't really know what to do with us, so that they look at us. And I remember one guy just doing this and being like, is that why you're here, Xbox? And we're like, yeah. And they shouldn't have done this, but they did. They came over, they weren't allowed to open the door, but they came over and just kind of yelled through the glass like, okay, we have 6. We have 2 Pros, 4 cores. So the core didn't have a hard drive and the Pro did. So, and you needed the hard drive obviously to be able to save data, but also there were various features like original Xbox backwards compatibility required the hard drive, etc., etc. So I knew I wanted it, but because there were only 2 of those and 4 of the cores, and I was third in line, I wasn't really sure what I was going to end up with. So the 2 people in front of me, the first guy seemed to really know what he was doing. He was like, yeah, I'm here for my games. You know, but then you had, after him, the second person was just some mother who was just like, I'm here because my son wants the thing. But, you know, it's fine. It means I'll get the system. Worst case scenario, I can buy the hard drive separately. It'd just be annoying, but whatever. So I knew I was good as long as I held out in the line. And like I said, Band of Brothers type of thing, you come out of that. But it was cool. So as the store gets ready to open, you inevitably see these people trying to cut and run, etc. But fortunately, the store manager of the Toys R Us had come out and took stock of like who was there. And he's like, yeah, you guys are fine. He's like, you got to stay in the line. But he's like, you know, I remember your faces. I know which ones are here. And he's like, if somebody else tries to jump, I'll know it wasn't them. So we felt a lot better about that. End up going into Toys R Us. We escorted right over to the R Zone, as it was called. This place to get video games. The first guy gets the Pro system. Like, that's what I want. That's what I need. That's what I'm here for. And then the second lady, the one who was in front of me, the soccer mom, if you will, she's just looking at it like, what's the difference? And they were like, that one has a hard drive and it costs this much. That one doesn't have a hard drive and costs that much. And she's like, so that one's cheaper? And they're like, yeah. She's like, yeah, give me the cheaper one. She didn't really know the difference, and I wasn't going to correct her on it. So she got that, which meant there was one Pro model, and that ended up with me. And I was very happy about that. And I got it home, turned it on, and that's when we were playing Condemned. Oh, it was a great time. I had such an awesome time playing that. It was like, I look at it as like, that was 20 years ago, which is horrifying. But it was also like the end of an era in a certain way, because that magic of that never really came back. Like, I enjoyed the PS3 at launch, but I had nothing to play on it. The Wii I did not enjoy at all. I had a little fun with Wii Sports, but that was hardly a magical experience. And after that, it was more just, well, we have to get the console. This console is the one I owe that last great console launch memory to. And it was appropriate. I was 18 at the time, you know. But anywho, that was a good time. So the last thing I want to touch on here before we go, other than to remind you, hey, go play your Xbox 360 today, is just kind of talk about some of the updates that have happened on 360 since. Obviously, we mentioned backwards compatibility has been brought over to some extent. We now finally have new accessories. I've been sitting with this thing the whole time. The Retro Fighters controller, the Hunter 360. Now we're finally getting better, newer controllers for the system. But also, we've seen things like hacking. Now, I have a hacked 360. I think it's a reset glitch hacked one. And I use that a lot because that's just the best way to do it. But they've been infamously difficult to hack as opposed to, say, the original Xbox. But finally, there's been a lot of progress there. We're getting to a point, I'm no expert on this, but I've seen some videos. People are like, yeah, now we've got to a point where there's like a firmware update off a USB drive and blah, 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 blah. Like, it's really coming along. So if you really wanted to invest in the 360, kind of a decent time to do it because it's just become much more accessible. Sadly, though, one of the legacies of this system is poor hardware. Famously, as we talked about Red Rings of Death on these things, the consoles are built okay. The controllers are actually not built all that well. The battery packs, I mean, like, I have a few of these. I don't have a single one that still works as far as the battery pack goes. The thumbsticks kind of wear out pretty easily. That's why I'm glad that Retro Fighters is making a new controller. But all the same, the Xbox 360 is a great console, and I think that you owe it to yourself, if you're at all interested, to go ahead, sit down, and play it a little bit today. So, there you go. Thank you guys, of course, for watching. I really appreciate it. If you guys do me a favor, please like the video, comment down below, subscribe if you've never done that before, and check out all my social media stuff in the description again. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, Patreon, Spreadshirt, Travel Channel, etc. I appreciate the support on all those platforms. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all later.